Welcome to episode 4 of Project Truthbook. Today we'll be talking about Steve Lawson and analysis paralysis. Please note that this episode was recorded on September 25th, 2024, and more information may have come out between then and when you're listening to this. There's also a point where I mistakenly attribute this controversy to MacArthur's church specifically. This is a mistake as I conflated Master's Seminary and MacArthur's church, so please disregard that note. Lastly, I've linked a resource that outlines Steve Lawson's career, which points to the fact that he is no longer a pastor as of 2015. I just wanted to point that out because almost all of the resources online give him the title of pastor, which in this case would be incorrect. Hey, John.
Hey, Alex. It's good to be back.
I know it's been so long. You were on your bougie vacation.
I was in Hawaii.
Fancy guy.
Yes, it was fun.
Is that how the Lord wants you to spend your money instead of on the poor?
Yes, I am poor, and I spend money on myself.
Cool.
And my poor wife.
Yeah. Well, she's married to you. She's pretty poor.
Yes.
Cool. Glad you had fun. I've been feeling like crap up until yesterday.
Did you catch Daniel's?
I did, but then it went away, and then I got something else. So maybe I had.
Oh, are you sick now?
No, I'm good now.
Oh, okay.
I'm finally slept well last night.
Because Daniel got me sick.
Oh no! Just before vacation.
That's okay. I was still able to have a good time. I was sick.
I was wondering about. I was gonna text you. I was gonna say, hey, did you guys get sick? Because
I was surprised actually because I kept, I kind of suspected he might be sick, so I was just being careful.
It was probably pretty mild, right?
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah,
it wasn't bad. I was uncomfortable the first couple days and maybe the first day or two in Hawaii, but it wasn't.
Yeah,
it didn't slow me down. So
I was sick
good.
too. It took a couple of days off work.
Yeah.
And but then last week I was just sick up until the day before yesterday. So maybe I had the C word.
Oh.
I don't know. C word 19. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was one of those man.
I just had that a month or two ago.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just kind of I was it wasn't bad enough that I had to not go to work or not work, but it was enough to be annoying. And so
yeah, I hate that.
Yeah, it was just the worst. So, but it just prolonged. It went on and on and on. I'm like, wow, this is what it's like for John to be sick.
Mm-hmm, pretty much.
Wow, that sucks.
But luckily, since I've been doing this new thing, when I get sick, I get over stuff in a week instead of 2 weeks.
Nice.
So that is awesome.
Cool. Other than
that's
that,
what normal people do.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's usually only a day or two that I'm out. Other than that, just still waiting for my prophetic XRP to go up.
I was gonna ask you about that.
No, I'm still down 10 cents.
Yeah.
Per my $100. This is not financial advice investment, and
the rate cut didn't help.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. So just kind of waiting see what happens there, just for fun. I'm not expecting anything, to be clear. But.
Yeah.
It's just going to be comical if it shoots through the roof.
So full of baloney.
Yeah, he's just kind of dropped off the radar. Nobody cares about him anymore.
Yeah, because he got destroyed by he got totally destroyed by Mike Winger, and then he just fell off the side of the world. I don't know.
Yeah, well, he'll go back to being a janitor, which is nothing wrong with that, but God calls us to be normal people in a normal world. Yeah. So there's that. Cool. Well, glad you liked your vacation. Obviously, we have to talk about some of the things that are going on in the more conservative circle, conservative Christian circle. This was news I don't follow anyone really, but
I was shocked. I try not to be shocked anymore, but I can't help it sometimes. I'm just dang. Steve Lawson had to step down from his church in Dallas.
Fun.
He confessed to an inappropriate relationship with a woman.
Wow.
And more information came out today that it was over the course of 5 years.
Wow.
He's 73. She's in her 20s,
Gross.
apparently. I guess I found it more surprising just because of having listened to him over the years. I've read his book, Pillars of Grace. That's a good book. He's a good teacher and pastor and stuff. Well, maybe not so great of a pastor, but I mean, he's
not a pastor.
He's a good expository preacher.
Yeah, he's not a pastor. Which is I'm saying that now because it's important for later. But yeah.
Yeah, and I guess just the way he rails against certain things very vehemently, I guess the ones that kind of squeak the most, or compensating for something, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, you're the people who are the most condemning or the most, I'm not saying he's, condemning all the time. He's one of, he's part of the Master's Seminary. He's a dean of Master's Seminary, which is John MacArthur's university that he founded, and that whole, church is very strong proponent of personal holiness, personal righteousness as evidence that you are truly in the faith, that kind of thing. And he beats that drum a lot. And to come to find out he's having this inappropriate, we don't know how inappropriate, but it's been 5 years. I don't know. Use your best guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't want to go beyond what I know personally.
Because the term that's been used is just relationship. Was that the term that was used?
The word was inappropriate relationship.
Okay, so that could be inappropriate in the fact of like,
we simply don't know.
Like everyone, and I'm in the camp here. I'm assuming, and it could be an incorrect assumption, that it is a romantic relationship.
Yes.
With the physical boundaries crossed, but it could also be like a.
Phil Johnson said, who is an elder at John MacArthur's church, said it was not. They've said that it was not there was no physical fornication.
Okay.
But that could.
Yeah, but that could be.
Okay, good. So they didn't.
That's emotional. I think that's the word I'm looking for. Like
an emotional affair.
Yeah, like when you're emotionally. I think the term that's used often is like you're emotionally cheating on your wife,
right.
And it's just it's just like you're. I don't know if that's the right word. I feel like there's another word for it, but you know what I'm talking about. Where
so there's no physical fornication, but I mean, there's a whole lot of things that can. I'm not saying any of this happened. I don't know, and I'd rather not speculate. But I'm just saying they say that to help you feel better a lot of times, and with technology nowadays, and I don't know. Anyway,
that's a good point. The physical part is important.
I just say that just to say we don't know, and I don't want anybody to get off the hook. Okay?
I mean,
that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, nonetheless, it is. What's inappropriate is inappropriate,
right?
Especially for obviously for someone in his position. So, a couple things that I want to kind of just point out is that you mentioned earlier, like pastor preacher. He is not a pastor. He wanted to just be a preacher and kind of travel the world preaching. This is my wife's source, which was relayed to her from the Allie Beth Stuckey podcast, which I'm so tired of listening to, but I mean, she's got good points. I'm just tired of you can only have so much of one thing, right? Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, I'm reminded of like Ravi Zacharias, where it's like you want to travel around, you're not really like quote unquote in a church, you're just kind of like speaking. You have kind of the notoriety, but you don't have any of the responsibility, and that makes it very easy for you to succumb to the lion that is crouching at the door. Right. I don't know. It's just kind of one of those, like, you're in the spotlight, but only just.
Let me ask you a question, though. But could it be possible to travel around and give speaking engagements and not fall into sin?
That's a good point. Thank you for asking that question. I am not saying that is for sure what's going to happen if that's the role you choose or the I'm going to call it a career because that's what you do. But I kind of feel like with my own two eyes, which is obviously a very small window of time and into a very limited view, I've seen two people who are kind of in a similar situation do the same thing. It's just kind of, I think I mentioned all of this to just say, that's kind of interesting. I wonder, I'm just curious, like I wonder why that is. It could just be coincidence, like as well. If it's coincidence, fine.
And those are the people you hear about because it's obvious.
Because they're prominent.
Right, they're prominent, they preach one thing, they do another. Anything that's hypocritical kind of gets the media blitz, right?
Yeah, so, I think the other thing, too, is, like, I kind of just feel like MacArthur's church keeps popping up.
Right.
And that's...
Sadly.
That's kind of... Yeah, I'm torn. So I think we can go into, like, you mentioned you have his book, and you mentioned that's a lot of... it's a good book. His theology does not align with mine and yours entirely. But
No.
There's obviously good nuggets in that book. And so
I thought so.
I think if we zoom out, the point I want to make is if we zoom out, I think we talked about this on the last episode. There's always like the example that we have is David. He wants that woman so much so he's going to go send her husband out, right? Everyone knows the story. And so
There's much controversy on Twitter about that.
I know. It's so
about the David comparison.
Yeah, but it's so
Go ahead, though.
It's because it's the most well-known, right? Mm-hmm. And it's the most preached on. Overall, that doesn't mean you throw away everything he's ever written, right? Like, at the end of the day, we are all sinners. There is no separation between... I'm going to put an asterisk on the statement. There is no separation between the person who goes to church and the person that is preaching at church. We are all just Christians, with the exception of those preaching will be, judged twice?
They're held to a stricter standard.
Well, twice as I forget what the exact verbiage is, but it's like
they're
twice
held
as
to
twice as
like
much,
a stricter
basically
judgment or something.
Yeah, so they're held to a stricter judgment is what we're going to go with. I'm sure someone will know the book, chapter, verse there. But other than that, yes, they will be. Let's say they'll be judged stricter, but me and him are still, at the end of the day, going to be judged. And at the end of the day, the blood of Christ is sufficient for my sin and his sin. I mean, I know the non-believers are just going to get a field day out of this. All the raging atheists are going to be like, oh, see, there's another one, herpty-derp. So I just want to kind of put that out there. Like, we have been sounding the alarm to non-believers saying, look, we are no different than you. Like, in terms of our temptations and, like, the fact that we are human and we sin, the difference is when we do sin, there is repentance, there is grieving, there is the realization that we have sinned against the Lord. Not, well, it doesn't matter because there's no God, right? That's the difference. But at the end of the day, we are all human. So, I don't think a lot of non-Christians know who he is. A lot of the controversy I see on Twitter are among other Christians. Those between the Reformed camp and the Provisionist camp, they're both kind of going at it, because some of the Reformed camp are saying, hey, David, and, God, caused, I saw this quote, kind of blew my mind, God caused his sin so that he could use it for his good, for Dr. Lawson's good. And then the Provisionists jumped all over that. You're basically saying God made him an adulterer. That's why Calvinism sucks. And it's just this back and forth. Calvinism versus Provisionism versus Arminianism. And then there's that stream that I'm seeing. There's another stream just talking about all these different problems that keep popping up with, the pastors who have notoriety and think they can get away with everything, and how are we going to have better accountability? But you mentioned one thing where you have these pastors who are doing the conference circuits. Is that a good thing? You touched on that. Other people are touching on that. There's a lot of conversation going on right now. And, of course, we have to contribute to the noise, Well, yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I think my take of, like, I didn't know who this guy was until just, like, a few days ago. Because I don't...
Isn't that sad?
Well, I just don't care. At the end of the day, I don't care. Like, we're not called to prominence. We're not called to be under prominent speakers or preachers. We're called to be under your local church. And so something you mentioned is like, it seems like this is happening a lot with prominent people. Well, it's happening everywhere. The difference is the prominent people get called out, and the people who are in their local church who are not, quote unquote famous, it's just, you don't ever hear about it. But I mean, you can go back to 1 Corinthians and you're like, oh, things like this have been a problem since literally the inception of the church.
The Corinthian church was not great.
Yeah.
But
they kind of
suck. Tore them into them for that.
Yeah, they were corrected, and I just wanted to kind of get those points out there. And then another thing I thought was very strange. So a couple details. Originally, it was he confessed to sin. Okay, but then it came out that he did not technically. It was more so the father of the person that he was having this relationship with said, if you don't go to the elder board or pastors or whatever you want to call them, I'm going to do it. And then he did it. The word that I heard used was an ingenuine or non-genuine,
insincere.
Thank you, insincere confession, basically because of that, and that's 100% correct. It makes it a lot harder to take him seriously. But sin can have a multitude of effects on people.
I think if you're confronted like that, it could definitely lead to, when David was confronted by Nathan the prophet for his sin, and it's just like all of a sudden it hit him.
Like you get hit by a freight train.
By a freight train,
Yeah.
Oh, I've sinned, I blew it,
So, but
you're starting to really realize this is real now.
So that's the question: was that the straw that broke the camel's back and said, "Oh my gosh, you're right. I really a kind of a realization of his actions," or was it well, they better hear it from me instead of from him because that's going to look worse. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to tell what camp this person.
Sure,
it's hard to tell what we don't know, right? But ultimately, as Christians, pray that he is grieving his sin, that he's going to be repentant of that, and that's kind of the most you can do. But also something like he's 74, 73. The girl's in her 20s. Mm-hmm. Can we just take a step here and be like, what about this girl? What the heck? This is so odd.
It's unusual.
Ew. Yeah. Super ew. Let's remember it always takes two to tango. And so what
Yeah. This is the touchy subject. This is the touchy subject.
No, it's not. It's pretty black and white to me.
Well, fair enough. Another conversation that Twitter's having right now,
you just live on Twitter.
Well, I've been seeing this pop up because the algorithm. Search for stuff on Steve, Lawson, and then the next thing I know,
the drama, baby.
All this stuff's popping up now. But that's the other conversation. He is a man in leadership. He's a clerical authority figure. There's a kind of a power dynamic, right? She's a young woman, apparently not part of his church. I don't know how they encountered each other. They said she wasn't part of the church.
Oh, so she goes to a different church.
Possibly. A question that's being asked,
she's quote unquote, I'm not a member.
Was she a former student? Who knows? I don't want to speculate. That's a question that's been asked that has not been answered. How did they get to know each other?
Doesn't matter. Gross.
Power dynamic, if that was the case, for instance, I'm not saying this has happened, but for instance, if he was a professor and she was a student, that's obviously unethical. It's obviously wrong. He's more at fault. And regardless, I feel like he's more at fault because
of course.
He's in a position of leadership and he's accountable, to God, and God has appointed him to be an example to the people, and he's royally flushed that down the toilet. This is not to say that the woman is, the female party in this is obviously not without any kind of personal, accountability in this either.
It's more so just.
But it's a very touchy subject.
I can't wrap my mind around where and why somebody would want to do that.
It happens.
I know it does, and it's just one of those. I
don't understand it either, personally.
I mean, this is definitely like you said, this happens, and this is not new to anyone. But it's just. I can't get over how gross this is.
Yeah, it's strange, but you don't see, you see this here, but you see, in this example, but in the secular world it happens a lot too.
Oh, of course, yeah, no, but the secular world is different,
sort
right?
Of dynamic there. I don't understand, but it is a phenomenon that does happen. Older man, younger woman.
The difference is the secular world. You're just gonna go, well, what do you expect? There are no limits,
right?
There's no morality. Even though they think that there's morality, there's not. I know that opens up a whole can of worms for anyone that might be like, I can't believe you just said that. But
yeah, and if somebody's gone through maybe some abuse or something,
that's possible.
That causes some behaviors to play out that maybe other people don't understand very well. I'm not saying that happened here. I do not know.
Yeah,
I don't want to speculate.
It's all speculation.
I'm just saying there are other scenarios where that happens, and maybe the female part has gone through some abuse, or doesn't have a father figure. We never know. All these different things.
Maybe she's just crazy.
Who knows?
She's just crazy. I think it's strange. MacArthur's church keeps coming up, and I kind of feel bad for the congregation there because that must be really discouraging for sure. Because obviously there are very good believers. Our brothers and sisters in Christ attend that church, right?
I just thought it would not to bring this up again, but I guess it shocked me just because knowing how hardcore he is into the lordship perspective on salvation, where it's very much a, your pursuit of holiness in life, your pursuit of righteousness, that has to be ever present and kind of, consistently going forward.
But I don't think that rules anyone out from being above the temptation of sin.
Oh, obviously not.
He's probably, if anything, he's more worried than we are about his salvation.
I mean, and then, I guess my frustration is you beat that drum and you instill trepidation in the people who listen to you.
I don't think he instilled trepidation, but that's a difference of opinion.
For 5 years, engaging in this activity that would call into question, even according to your theological belief, if you're even a believer or not, if you're not just an imposter like Judas. For the record, I don't think he's not a Christian or anything. To listen to him and to talk on this subject, you're always having to, oh man, am I in the faith? Have I taken stock today? Is my performance an A+ today? And if it's not, oh man, I don't know if I'm really, I got to, do more personal inventory to make sure I'm a Christian. You never have assurance that way.
I think that...
And the way they have assurance, the way they talk about having assurance, you got to go to the book of John, you got to follow these 5 things, and it's just, I don't know about that.
We've talked about before, first a little bit after when you were leaving last time, I have a feeling, I could be wrong, as I say over and over again. I think that that's the angle you're coming at because you are still wrestling with a lot of that. Mm-hmm. A couple clips you sent me, speaking specifically to that, some of the verbiage he uses is, if you are doing these things, robbing, stealing, adultery, he talks about gouging out your eye, cutting off your hand, stuff like that. If you're doing those things, his words, not mine, like you're going to hell. And so...
You could go to hell.
You could go... Yeah. And so...
Meaning you weren't really a Christian to begin with. If
right.
You're doing
because
these things,
you
you're
didn't,
practicing these things.
Right. Because you didn't repent or however you want to word that. To me, when I hear that as if you do that without a conscience about it. Without oh yeah, I just did that and that was really bad. I don't care. That's not a sin. There's no conviction. That is me giving him the benefit of the doubt to be 100% clear. Because that's just, I like to just assume. I just like to give people the benefit of the doubt because that's just what I do. So that's how I hear it. But at the same time, if I were to break that down and let's decrypt this, so to speak, I can very much understand why somebody would come to the conclusion that, oh yeah, this is what he believes. Now you've listened and you've read his book, and so you know way more. And so after having said what I just said, I'm going to actually go to your side and say, you know him better than I do, and you know his theology better than I do. And so the lordship salvation, I can understand why that stings a little bit more.
Here's the thing. Imagine being one of his many students that he's had, and he's talking about the importance of having allegiance, committing hard into Christ and counting the cost and all these things he lists in his sermons and his lectures and things like that in order to know that you have saving faith, right?
So that last part is the part that sticks me, is in order to know that you have saving faith. That is the part that I'd have to hear it, and maybe I did hear it, but I have to hear that from his mouth in a sermon or something where I need to hear those words.
He's describing that as the nature of saving faith. Saving faith is an allegiance. It's a loyalty. It's a commitment, a full-on commitment.
But I agree. If you said just those words, just what you said now, just those words, I agree with that. Because when you become a Christian, you give your life to Christ, and it's, I am committed to Christ. Right. My allegiance is with Christ. My life is now for Christ. I'm going to repent of these things. Because, first off, the Holy Spirit has convicted me of that. I know that these things are wrong. I'm going to do my best. This is the word that I think gets left out often, is do my best to, quote, be holy for I am holy, as Jesus said. So I don't, But that's just those words, so go on.
Right. So if you would just say a level of commitment like trust, for instance, I trust you, I believe you, right? That involves some sort of leaning into, right? Some sort of commitment or something. They don't just say that. They don't just say you need to commit. They list things. They drive home this idea that faith, saving faith, is kind of this laundry list of things. Okay. Not only that, the faith leads to some behaviors. Okay. Not just some behaviors. It has to be, they say this, it has to be a trajectory of increasing pursuit of holiness. Not saying you're sinlessly perfect. They would never say that. And that's fine. That's correct. But that you are always pursuing holiness. You are always growing toward, greater stages of personal righteousness. And if you're not doing that, not to say categorically you're not in the faith, but you may not be in the faith. So there's always this doubt.
So you're saying,
and imagine being these students listening to this being trepidatious, and then they're thinking, okay, you would, not to say you would look to the man, but you're looking to him because he's telling you these things, and you can't help but look at him as an example. And then for the last 5 years, he's been having an adulterous relationship of whatever flavor that might have been. It's still, one of those things you would list as, well, gee, I don't even know if you're saved. And could you imagine a weak believer, hearing these things and wrestling with these issues and taking these things to heart, so looking to him for some guidance and some understanding about saving faith and that sort of thing. And then for the last 5 years, he's been engaging in this inappropriate relationship that could indicate that he was never, quote, a Christian to begin with, according to their theology.
Yeah.
Could you imagine how devastating that must be?
I could definitely see
That's my frustration. That is what drives me crazy about this whole thing more than anything else. So I don't think he's not a Christian.
You're concerned about the other believers.
Yeah.
That's probably the best take to have. Again, I could be wrong because I haven't listened very much. Just as a one Christian, disconnected from the celebrity preacher type thing. You mentioned saving faith is faith in Christ, but also this laundry list of things. I almost kind of think he's just clarifying, okay, well, here's practical examples as to what it looks like. But then again, maybe not. Maybe it is genuinely that. And if it is that, that's a tricky place because in his defense, I think he could argue, or any other Christian who falls into that group of theology, I think you can argue if you're a Christian, your faith and your knowledge will continue to increase in Christ. I think. The big thing as you were explaining that stuck out to me was, it sounds like you don't believe that they allow for seasons of distance from God, where you're like a backslidden Christian, perhaps, or for the last 6 months to last year,
5 years, maybe?
It could be 5, who knows, right? It could be a long time. The Lord knows. Where, I just haven't been going to church. I've just been a terrible person, and there's no reason to think anyone would think that I'm a Christian. Not that it matters what people think, but that is the gauge by which humanity makes judgment. So if that's the life I'm living as a proclaiming Christian, why would anyone think that faith is genuine? I kind of feel like they've thought about that type of thing a lot, and they've been able to say, okay, where do we arrive if we break this down? When we break down, faith without works is dead. What does that actually mean? And that's just the conclusion they've arrived at.
Right, and I don't have anything. I think there's a spectrum, just like everything, with Lordship salvation. John MacArthur and his ilk, like Steve Lawson, are pretty strong into the saving faith thing, where it's just kind of this laundry list where it seems like they're front-loading the gospel with all this stuff, You got to count the cost. You got to do and John MacArthur said, there's no such thing as a carnal Christian.
I don't even know what that means.
There's no such thing as a Christian who lives like the world, who calls himself a Christian. He's not a genuine Christian.
Yeah,
there's friendship with the world is enmity with God.
That's such a loaded statement.
Well, read Corinthians. Read 1 Corinthians.
Yeah.
Paul says, I have to speak to you as to one who's carnal. And that church had a lot of carnality in it.
Yeah.
There was somebody having a incestuous relationship with his stepmother. That's disgusting.
Gross. Yeah.
So
I
think
the
some
words
people-
need to be. I think they need to be defined differently.
well, read The Gospel According to Jesus by John MacArthur. That's the book that kind of sparked the whole Lordship Salvation debate. That's where he kind of laid out his views on it.
Okay.
And a lot of what MacArthur says, I've heard Steve Lawson say,
Naturally.
and a lot of other people. Some people are a little less intense about it, you know.
So here's another question then. I thought it was very strange that after all of this came out, they still let him preach one last sermon.
I don't think that came out after he taught.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure. I think he knew it was coming, though.
Ah.
Like, because the dad confronted him. So he taught that Sunday.
What's this guy's name?
He
Steve Lawson?
said,
I don't even know his name.
Steve Lawson, yeah.
Okay.
Stephen Lawson, Dr. Lawson.
I'm going to type in Steve Lawson timeline and see if it knows what I'm looking for. It does not.
Because all this came out on, I believe, Tuesday, or no.
Like yesterday, Tuesday, or a week prior to yesterday?
Daggone it, I don't remember when it came out.
So let's pretend.
Okay, so I think he taught that Sunday. It came out during the week, but I think he was already confronted by the dad and
prior to that,
and then he gave that sermon where he said, "Don't look at don't look at just one thing and judge his whole ministry."
Oh yeah, that was.
You gotta look at everything.
That makes it worse, man. That makes it so much worse.
Look at how doctrinally correct he is and all this stuff.
Yeah, that makes it so. Like, why are you trying to defend yourself right now?
Yeah, and then they took that sermon down. Which
Good.
I thought was interesting.
Good. That's the right decision. That just makes it worse. And so for me, up until now, we've had the conversation as if we did not know that. And now that we know that, that kind of pushes me into the camp of like, I don't really have much patience for this guy. I will continue to pray for him, but I don't really want to give him... Obviously, still pray for him. Pray for the woman, too.
Yeah.
Like, even as gross as it is... like, it's still a need of repentance. Like, ultimately, the Lord is grieved over this. This is no different from any other sin that grieves the Lord from Christians, right? So there was another big thing I wanted to talk about, and now I don't remember what it was. We'll check our group chat that should it ever leak, we're screwed.
Somebody tried to take out Trump again. No.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm surprised the media doesn't even touch on this, but I shouldn't be surprised. I don't think any other presidential candidate has ever had a two-time attempt on them. Ever.
I don't know.
As a presidential candidate.
I'm too uneducated to know.
I don't think that has ever happened before. There's always been kind of a one-time attempt or success. Then they catch the guy and it's done. Right?
Such a weird case, too. That dude looks like just a crazy guy. I am not surprised that that's what you look like.
That guy's background is very strange.
Yeah.
How did the feds not know about him? Strange.
Yeah. Oh, I know what I want to talk about. Just because you really want to do something doesn't mean the Lord put that on your heart.
Absolutely, yeah, sure. Yeah, I feel that God gives us desires a lot of times to do His will.
Define that.
Like, I think God gives you the heart to do things.
Is that the same as I woke up today and I really want to move to Kansas?
Could be.
How do you distinguish that?
You pray about it. You ask the Lord to open the doors. And if it's not His will, this is what I do. I do Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 in my head all the time. Trust the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him and He'll direct your paths. I see that as a promise personally. And anytime I'm encounter a situation or I have a desire to try something or do something for the Lord, I pray about it and ask God to open the door, lead me in the direction He wants me to go, knowing that He'll direct my steps. And if it's not His will, I pray that He would shut the door. And if it's not like something that obviously you sift everything through God's word,
Right.
If it's obviously not against His word and the door is open, then I say, give it a shot.
Yeah, but I want to go
God
to
has
Kansas.
uniquely created you with certain desires and giftings and callings. And I think that honestly, you do things because you want to do them, right? And Sometimes we have things that we're passionate about, and God, I think, gives you those.
Yeah,
You know?
I want to go to Kansas for selfish reasons.
Okay.
Because California is slowly falling into the pit of hell. And
But God could use that.
Also,
and I think
tyranny.
Yeah.
And I don't know. At some point, you can't take it anymore. Type stuff.
Sure. I think that God could use that. You can only operate on the information you have. You're a human being.
True.
You're limited. But God's sovereign. So even if you went and you did it out of the integrity of your heart, I think God could bless it.
Yeah, I mean, as a father now,
Yeah.
I don't want to raise my son here.
Yeah.
California is actually the worst. It's beginning to boil my blood. But God never promises anybody a life without oppression.
Sure.
It's not there. If anything, he guarantees the opposite because you're a Christian. And so is it just I want a more convenient life? Is that really a valid reason? We've always prayed, Lord, if you want us to stay here, make it so. Mm-hmm. And here I am with my nice job.
I think it's good to be flexible.
Yeah.
I think it's good to be compliant to what God may want you to do. But I think that God also wants us to do things we like to do.
Yeah, that's the problem. Well, not the problem, but
well, think about it.
One of the things
when you do things that you're passionate about, you do more of those things, right? You do it at a better quality.
But I feel like we only say that because we live here. If we lived in, let's say, Afghanistan, I feel like that would be not reading the room in terms of oh, you have that luxury to do what you want. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
So I kind of just worry that's an American mentality.
Certainly growing up in Afghanistan and under oppression and things like that, obviously your options are much more limited. And there's cultural considerations. Some people think differently about these types of things than we would hear.
Yeah,
but I
that's
think
what I'm saying. It's just they're not going to be yes.
God could give somebody a heart in Afghanistan to start an underground church.
Yeah.
Because he loves to share the gospel and to teach people and to instill God's truths into people. I mean, I think that's not an accident.
Yeah, but this is such a well, I don't know, because okay, so there's two sides of this coin that I wrestle with. On one side of the coin, it's I just want a more convenient life, and I don't want to pay as much in taxes and all these worldly things, because I like our church, even with its flaws. I like my church. But then on the other side of that coin is, well, what if there's something in Kansas that God needs me there,
right?
For an encounter with someone, you never know, right? And this is again, maybe we need to title this one, I Wish I Was a Charismatic, because you've seen it, right? It's man, I was in the right place at the right time, and it's well, had I not moved there, that would not have happened, right? Or maybe it's there to support the church that's there. I don't know. I don't want to. I'm worried that I would go for the wrong reason.
Yeah, and I wouldn't limit yourself to thinking linearly like that. Obviously, you come at it as you believe God's sovereign. The story plays one way, and that's fine. But that's from God's perspective. You could stay here, and if you're walking in obedience to the Lord, trying to please Him, God could use that. If you're in Kansas walking in obedience to the Lord, God could use that.
And that's another thing too that I remember from an Ask Pastor John snippet, similar to what you were saying. Gosh, I'm just having a massive brain fart right now. Basically, no matter what you do it for the glory of God.
Right.
So, if you stay in California, it's for the glory of God. You do it to the glory of God. Mm-hmm. If you go to Kansas, it's for the glory of God. You got it in everything you do. And so I'm just kind of I don't know that I'm doing anything different here that I would be doing there. I'm not involved in a ministry here that is in dire need of my help or anything like that. Yeah. There are people who need to hear Christ in every state, particularly there. There's a lot of meth heads.
Right, and God could use that. That's the thing. I think that, a lot of times our impressions of God is that He's going to give you the thing that's the worst things because it seems more holy or something. And I just don't think that that's necessarily the case.
Yeah.
I think that God has uniquely created you with certain passions. Like my wife and I really like listening to theological podcasts.
Oh, your wife is so tired of you listening to that.
Yeah. My wife, like I'll listen to something on the radio, whatever, about some, niche topic that I'm interested in about theology. And my wife cannot understand how I would find that interesting.
I mean, I'm in
Right?
that same camp a little bit.
And my wife loves teaching kids, loves she's a teacher. She loves the childhood education stuff. And when she's telling me about all that stuff,
You just kind of go to sleep.
my ears start bleeding a little bit. No, but I just am not into that at all.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I feel you.
And that's because I believe God has created her with those desires and those giftings. I'm not saying they're a spiritual gift. I mean, they could be, because she's always had that passion, but God could use that.
It's 'cause
And
she's a
he
woman.
created her because he knew that that's the path she would take. And as she walks with the Lord, she acknowledges the Lord in her direction in life, in our direction, in our married life. He's using that. She's being a light in a very dark place, being in a public California school system.
Oh, man, how does she do that?
Oh, there's ways.
Oh, there's ways.
Yeah. So far.
That's a tricky arena.
It's easier in the primary grades.
Yeah.
As you get up in grades, there's more limitations. So right now, she's in a pretty good spot. I mean, the Lord, like Psalm 37:4, it says, "Delight yourself in Yahweh, and He'll give you the desires of your heart." And I just think that's principles. Just saying, is you're trusting the Lord, walking with the Lord.
Yeah, but that's
making the Lord your priority.
That's also
your
like
desires become His desire. His
Yes,
desires become
thank
your
you.
desires. That's
Exactly.
what I'm trying to say.
And that's kind of
And-
like, am I not delighting myself in the Lord enough such that I'm focused on frivolous things?
And even if you are, I think if you pray, He will direct your steps. If you ask Him, if you acknowledge Him in all your ways, He'll direct your steps. I think that is a promise. The Bible also says that God works in you both to will and to do of His good pleasure. Philippians 2:13.
So do you want me to leave then? Should I go? I've
No,
got my to-do
I
list.
personally don't want you to leave.
I've got my
but I
to-do
want
list on the
you-
wall there for when I'm ready to go. I've got my list of crap I got to get done, and once that's done, I'm out. But
I personally don't want you to leave.
you'll be the last one.
But I personally also want you to do what will make you, I want you guys to be happy.
Yeah.
But also, if God's calling you to it, who am I to stand in the way?
Yeah,
I want that more for you than what my selfish desires are.
Yeah.
Because you're my friend. And
Sure.
I love you guys, and I want
Those are lies.
you to. No, I'm serious.
You
I
don't
really mean that.
You don't even like us. I'm just kidding.
I really mean that. If that meant you leaving and I hardly ever see you again, so be it.
You can come with us.
Oh.
Or you can go to, what is that, Portland,
Yes, let's move to Portland.
Phoenix, or Denver. Those are your other
We might
options.
move to Arizona. I don't
Should we
know.
get Denver Boy on the podcast?
Dude, Denver was so boring.
Oh, yeah, it was pretty bland
No offense
there.
to Denver.
Uh,
It was not my cup of tea.
sorry, Mr. Denver Boy. You know who you are. Yeah, well, okay, well, here's the thing. Denver's not about, like, the city, in my opinion. Denver's about the fact that you have the mountains all around you, but also the city.
Let me ask you a question.
The answer is no.
Philippians 2:13 says, God works in you both to will and to do of His good pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that?
God does his work through you.
Right.
And his
The
work,
will
the
to
will
do
of
it.
God is his pleasure.
But He works on your will to do His good pleasure.
Yeah, in other words, I'm being conformed to him, but it's his will. I'm going to draw a very extreme example, which is nowhere near on the same universal plane at all. But Jesus said, if you would allow it, let this cup to pass from me.
Yeah, that was Jesus, though.
Yes, that's why I said it's nowhere near on the...
No person can take the cup that He took.
Right. But what I'm getting at is Jesus wanted the will of the Father more than he wanted his own, I would say, on a very basic understanding. I understand that you could go into hours on just that one detail, but in the same way, the verse that you just quoted, like, it's not about me and what I want. It's about what God wants.
Mm-hmm.
And so Maybe my worry is I am in my own way and I'm so laser focused on the things that frustrate me that I'm not focused on what God is really wanting for me. That's the fear.
I would just say, as you delight yourself in the Lord, He'll give desires of your heart. I mean, really, as you are spending time with Him and enjoying your relationship with the Lord, His desires become your desires. You know?
Yeah.
And are they perfect because you're in your flesh? No. But I think a safeguard to that is asking Him, acknowledging Him in all your ways, and He'll direct your paths. I think that's scriptural. And you're called to suffering sometimes. I understand that. I'm not negating that at all.
I'll put air quotes suffering because our American suffering.
Right. You know,
I don't want to sound insensitive.
You know, there's persecution. Persecution is not limited to just people throwing rocks at you or whatever. You know, the enemy persecutes you too.
It's true.
You know, if you're walking with the Lord and you're pleasing Him, the enemy tries to harass you. You know, that's persecution.
Yeah.
You're not getting burned alive or whatever, but you know what I'm trying to say.
So come to Kansas with us, then. Let's go. Come on, we'll go buy some guns.
That's not the desire of my heart right now.
Well, as your daughter gets older.
But I just think that there's a principle there. I think it's real. I think that, honestly, I feel like following the Lord, you know, there's His commands, right? There's His revealed will that's in His word. You know, thou shalt not murder. I mean, obvious stuff, right? Mm-hmm. God's will is for you to flee and abstain from sexual immorality, right? Those clear guidances. But what about, you know, where do I move? Where do I buy a house? Who do I marry? You know, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, I think as you spend time with the Lord, as you're delighting yourself in Him, enjoying your relationship I think you can enjoy your relationship with God. I really do.
That's true.
He will direct your steps, and He's sovereign. And as long as you're doing things out of the integrity of your heart, God will honor that.
Yeah.
You know, not to say you won't have road bumps, not to say people won't treat you bad, not to say that there will be hard, like somebody who goes out and starts a church somewhere. You know how, you've heard the stories, or the enemy sometimes is relentless.
Yeah.
And when someone's trying to do something like that, because he knows the impact it will have, you know, but you keep going. And a lot of those people keep going because, A, they have the support from other good Christians who are praying them through it and all that stuff. But I think, too, is because they have a passion that God's given them, you know?
Yeah.
And they keep going.
What are the examples that come to your mind when you go, oh, they got it wrong? Like they claimed, well, the Lord put this on my heart. And then it's like, no, you got that wrong. Mm-hmm. First thing, the most stereotyped Christian thing that comes to my mind is that dude that was like, I'm going to go witness to the unreached tribe right off of India or wherever it is, where they literally kill everyone who ever tries to step foot on this island. I'm going to go with, I kind of see what you were trying to do, but I think you were a bit misguided. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, or maybe he wasn't. You know, like, I don't know. There's so many examples of like...
I don't know what was going on in his heart or anything, you know?
Naiveness.
Possibly. Being a little foolish. Yeah. I don't think God necessarily... I mean, there are times where it seems like God calls you to do things that seem a little irrational, you know?
Yeah.
You see that in the Old Testament, right? You see that in some of the New Testament, too. God calls you to do things that don't seem practical or whatever. But again, I think that if you pray about it, and if you are genuinely doing it to please Him, and you are stepping out in faith, I think God will lead your steps and direct your steps.
Yeah.
You know, if you're insisting on your own way, I mean, even as a Christian, sometimes people can go, I feel like they won't listen to counsel from other people. Like, I don't think you should do this. I don't think you should do this. Mm-hmm. Don't ignore that. You know?
Yeah.
Sometimes people around you, you know, bad example, but your heart gets in the way of things like, I felt like I should date this person, you know, and everyone around me is like, don't date this person. I was like, no, I think
every guy's been there before.
I think God's telling me I should date this person, you know, and it's like, at the end of the day, it was my own flesh.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
And people are like, no, don't do it. Everybody around me was telling me that, not just family, you know, and friends. And even like there was like a pastor, I asked his opinion on it. He's like, I don't think that's a good idea. You know what I mean?
And what did you do?
I ignored all of that. And I think
and how did that relationship go?
Not very well. Not very well at all. And so I would just don't
Yeah,
don't
no,
ignore that.
I know what you're saying.
You know,
like
if these are people, I'm not okay. If everyone around you is like totally doesn't care about God, totally doesn't care about that's a problem. But you know, if the advice you're getting from everyone around you is like, you know, totally not interested in what the Lord's will is for your life, then yeah, don't give their opinions that much weight. Okay.
Yeah, my brother tried to use that on me once, and I was like, "That's not how that works, dude."
But if everybody around you, like if you have godly friends, godly relatives, and maybe a mixed bag, I don't know, but they're all kind of saying, "Don't do this." I would listen to that because God uses other people to speak to you sometimes. You know?
Yeah, that's true. And my situation's like split because her family's out there. My wife's family is out there, and so they're like, "Yeah, you know, come on out," and they're the believers.
Mm-hmm.
My family, not so much. And so, based on what you just said, I go, "Okay, well, that makes it easier." But yeah, I don't know.
It's hard.
It's very hard. Yeah, and like obviously, I don't want to leave my family here, but
I think
I'm tired of being poor. California, words I can't say on a Christian podcast. Stuff that we got to deal with. So, yeah, your advice though is solid for any, because obviously I'm not the only one who has wrestled with this. Prayer. All you can do is pray.
There are many times in my life where God gave me kind of a stirring, and I started kind of leaning into that and praying about it, and it turned out it was the Lord. You know, I had this, like my wife was like, we should go look at houses, go buy a house or whatever.
When was this?
Years ago.
Before you got your house?
Before we got our house. And I'm like, nah, I don't really want to look at houses. And then I remember this clearly one day. It's like all of a sudden, I woke up on a Saturday and we had nothing going on that day. And I was like, I feel like I want to go look at houses. There were some model homes.
Okay.
And it just kind of was this interesting stirring. And I felt like it might have been the Spirit.
So it felt there was an element of that felt unnatural.
Yeah, because up to that time, I was like, no, we got to save money. We got to, you know what I mean?
You cheap man.
And, you know, we had a pretty good lease or whatever on our apartment or whatever. But then there was this feeling I had like, it's time to look at houses. And I felt pretty good about it, you know, and I felt like maybe this is the Lord. Let's go check it out. So we started kind of looking at model homes. And then we called this real estate agent.
Wow, that's a lot of commitment. You went straight to calling a real estate agent.
Well, we just wanted to it was a friend of my parents. And we called her, just wanted to ask, hey, you know, we like this area. We want to know, you know, if you want to represent us. And she goes, well, it's interesting you call because I have a house coming up on the market in about a month. And I'm the listing agent. And if I represent you, I'll give you the first run at it. You know, that was a house we ended up buying.
Yeah, things like that definitely exist. That's a very similar situation.
And she kept telling us she's not a believer or anything. She's like, this never happens. This is like a miracle. She kept saying that, you know, this kind of stuff. You know, they accepted our offer. You know, we love the house. Wow. We've been there 6 years now.
And that's interesting because just a quick surface take of that situation is like, okay, the Lord provided for you, but I almost wonder if it was more for her benefit than yours. You know, maybe there was some weird seed planted or watering of a seed. Maybe. You never know, right?
I don't know. I just know. I feel like
she'll send you postcards for Christmas. Every real estate agent does that. It's like,
no, the lender does though.
Please stop sending me this. I don't care. I was very appreciative of your service.
I just know
way back then
that had she listed it on the open market, it would have gone for much more than they were asking for.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Got it.
It didn't even go to the open market.
Oh, wow.
She let us go. If we hadn't called at that time and got I mean, it all lined up beautifully, and we have this home that we love and this area we love.
You bougie.
And God just blessed us radically.
So bougie.
You know. And we got it for a price that it could have gone for so much more.
Yeah, that's crazy. What I mean? That's awesome.
And so it was amazing. But I just see that sometimes God stirs in your heart like this interesting desire, this interesting kind of stirring. And, you know, it sounds very subjective, but that's happened to me more than once.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty interesting. And I would say just lean into that. Pray about it. Don't go breaking doors down. I think if you do it in a spirit of humility and in a spirit of wanting to explore it in a God-honoring way, I think God will show you. I think he promises that. He will direct your steps.
Similar, yeah. Like with this house, my mom was like, "You need to go buy a house."
Mm-hmm.
She's just like, "You should buy a house because you're making good money. You're working at this tech company." I mean, I was just doing customer service, nothing fancy. But I was in a situation where, I'd been living with mommy and daddy for long enough that I had a ginormous savings because we're brown and they don't charge no kids rent because that's the way it should be. No, 100%. I was not irresponsible. That's the difference.
Fair enough.
Because a lot of white people like to be like, well, how's he ever going to learn? Like, it's possible to understand that when you leave the house, it's not going to be as nice as it's been. Like, that's very easy. Well, it's not easy. Well, it might be easy. That's not a unrealistic expectation. But all the white people seem to think, nope, I got to charge them rent because blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, how do you expect your kids to get anywhere if not achieve anything, but like, how do you expect them to get on their own 2 feet well? Do you want them stumbling into the world or do you want them walking into the world? Those are my 2 cents on that. But nonetheless, my mom was like, you should do it. Great. So I called a realtor after putting on Facebook, hey guys, who do you need for realtor? And like a month, maybe a month into it, hey, this house here that we are sitting in now came up on the market. The day of, my mom sent it to me because my mom just insists on doing everything for everyone. I love my mom, but you know how it is. But she sent me, said, hey, this just came up. So I sent to the realtor and said, hey, we just saw this. Like today it came up. And like we were able to see it like that day or the day after, something like that. Perfect. Offer went in. I went 10 over because I just wanted the house. Mm-hmm. And like 10,000 on a mortgage is not really any difference on your monthly payment. But it makes a difference to the seller. So who cares? And I got the house. And everyone at the bank was like, wow, you're getting this house. You got 9% down. You have a 4.5% interest rate. This is like unheard of. And so, yes, there are certain times where you go, okay, all of these things fell into place too conveniently to just be happenstance.
And that's not to say that's how it works every time.
Yes, exactly.
Obviously, it does not.
There are also times where it is just like, okay, yeah, that just kind of.
It's trial and error.
My favorite part is I took my car in for an oil change and now this thing doesn't work. Yeah, things break sometimes at the same time. Mm-hmm. That's how that works. So yeah, so similar situation, and I think. Interestingly enough, in my last bout of really wanting to get out of the state, it wasn't like I need to leave right now. It was more like I need to give it about a year. More so, though, because I just have stuff to do. And it could be that the Lord's using that to line things up with his timing.
Yeah.
A very
absolutely
practical use. Practicality. So great. But we know that the great news is the rest of the family, I think, is really starting to be weary as well of being here. And so I think that will line up better. So I'm going to say a year, but it'll probably end up being like 2 so that we can go with the rest of the family. And they're not going to Kansas, though. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Florida.
Ugh. I mean, Florida's cool, but not too humid. I'll continue praying about it, obviously, and whatever the Lord has for me, He has for me. On the flip side, I really like my job. Like I got the best job ever, and so it'll be kind of hard to walk away from that. But
yeah,
on the other side as well, I would like to build my real estate. My joke is, slumlord. I want a real estate empire. Life's too short. I don't want to work.
200-year-old houses.
Heck yeah, man. Those are the best. Hey, if I can make it, I can make it. There's nothing wrong with making money. There's only something wrong with making money when it's done immorally and you then don't do anything with your money. Like, you get so rich, you just turn in, like, you idolize it, right? Mm-hmm. But I want to give more. When you have money, that's a lot easier to do.
It's definitely harder to be consistent in giving when your paycheck's not very...
Yeah. That'll be for next time. So the next thing is I want to talk about tithes next time.
Yeah. That's something that
I have a weird thing on that.
I feel like that would be a very interesting topic. I have a lot of ideas on that.
Okay, cool. We'll talk about tithes.
Yeah, I think it's...
Let's be Mormon and make sure that all of the members are giving.
Exactly,
if not,
10%.
They're excommunicated.
No, man.
Let's connect our bank account to the Mormon church bank account.
I feel like there is a principle to, I don't know.
Am I going to be healed of all my...
I just feel like we are where we're at today because God's just blessing us. Because of, maybe because of our giving. I don't know. Like, I just...
Don't lie.
Like,
you're a, what is it? Prosperity gospel.
No, I think that God promises, he says, test me now in this, if I do not open the windows of heaven and bless you with a blessing you can't even contain, as you're faithful in your giving, basically. Yeah. And, there's so many things that could break or wear out or whatever. I bought a car at the same time another relative of mine bought a car. Mm-hmm. It's the same car, had actually less miles than this car. That car's already in the junkyard.
And yours is still going.
And...
I had the same situation. I have a $300 car that's basically new.
But that's just one example. There's so many things that could like wear out or break or whatever, and it's just not happening.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think about that sometimes while I'm driving.
Right, like in the Promised Land, even though they were wandering in the desert for 40 years, their sandals didn't wear out, their clothes didn't wear out. There's something supernatural. I don't know. And I feel like
the Lord is keeping the tires from wearing out on your car.
My tires from I don't know, man. Like, there's just things where we're like, how did we get blessed with this? And I know it's not just material things. Like, there's other things too. There's definitely a spiritual blessing that comes from your giving and stuff like that. But sometimes it is material.
Yeah, it doesn't mean God will never give you anything, right?
No,
but I don't think it's from giving. I think it's just regardless. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. We'll see how prosperity gospel we want to get.
But prosperity gospels is, your words claiming things.
Name it and claim it.
Blab it and grab it kind of thing, right?
Blab it and grab it. I've never heard that before.
Name it and claim it.
Yeah.
And they will start speaking things into existence as though they were. They misquote the passage that talks about how God speaks into things that are not as though they are. Mm-hmm. They'll say, you need to speak as there are, or whatever. It's like, no, God does that.
Yeah,
you don't do
come
that.
on, dummies. So okay, cool. We'll chat about that next time. Well, that was fun. I think this was great. Yeah. I enjoyed this because I just did. Good time. I missed you. Why are you so far away for so long?
Have you had a chance to edit last week's?
Nope, because I'm lazy. It's been
it's a pain.
It's been bothering me, and I'm like, okay, I got to get that done.
Yeah.
But I've been sick, so I don't care at the same time. But cool, man. Well, thanks for hanging out. Cool. Next week, we'll talk about some tithing. And mansplain women in ministry again.
Oh, gosh.